Hi everyone, welcome to Bhutan e-learning program, Key Stage 5, Biology 11 and 12. This is Lucky Pradhan from Druk School. So to begin with today's session, let us see, did you know that we have 11 organ systems in our body that actually controls the overall functioning? Now what are those 11 organ systems in our body? Now let's see one by one. Now here, firstly, we have circulatory system that deals with the circulation of blood and other fluids in our body. Next is digestive system. This digestive system controls the digestion of the food we eat to produce energy. Now next is endocrine system. This is merely the hormonal system that we have in our body. And integumentary system, it deals with the outer layering, the skins of our body. And next, immune system. This immune system is merely the defense system of our body. Now next is the muscular system. Muscular system is merely to deal with helping us to do work with the help of the muscles. And renal system, it deals with the kidney system. Now next is reproductive system. This reproductive system is a system that helps in reproduction to create new generations. And another one is respiratory system, which is associated with lungs and helps in breathing. Now the 10th one is skeletal system, which is to do with the skeletons of our body. Now I have told you about the 10 different organ systems in our body. Which one is the other one? Because in the previous slide I had told you that there are 11 organ systems that control our body. Now which one is the last one? The last organ system is known as the nervous system. This nervous system is also called as master system in our body, or the master organ systems. This is a master organ system because it controls the overall functioning of the other organ systems in our body. So now this nervous system is divided into other two, that is the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. When you talk about central nervous system, it's the most important, and it deals with the brain and the spinal cord. Another one is peripheral nervous system. This peripheral nervous system is a system that arises from the central nervous system and moves to the different parts of the body. We will now go into, before entering into the detail of the nervous system, we will see today's objectives. So basically today we are going to talk about the central and the peripheral nervous system and different functions associated with them. So by the end of today's session, we will be able to learn the following things. That is, explain structure of brain and spinal cord. Next is describe the functioning or the functions of the different parts of brain and spinal cord. Then we should also be able to compare classical and operant conditioning. Now we will go into detail of the central nervous system, that is brain and the spinal cord. Now let's begin with brain. Do you know where is our brain located? Our brain is covered by a tough skull that is in our head. The brain is inside our skull. Why is this skull present? Because this brain is the most important part of our body, as I mentioned. That's why, to protect it from damage, it is inside the very tough and hard skull. Now to go into detail about brain, basically overall the brain is divided into two hemispheres, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And the functioning of these two hemispheres are totally antagonistic to one another. The right hemisphere controls the functioning of the left hemisphere, and the left hemisphere controls the functioning of the right hemisphere. Now, other functions associated with each hemisphere are that the left hemisphere controls motor side of the right hemisphere. Another one is the left hemisphere also controls the speech, language, comprehensions, analysis, and calculation. And the right hemisphere, it controls creativity, the context, perception, recognition of the faces, and also the memory. Hope you all understood about the antagonistic function of the two hemispheres of the brain. Now to go into next, we have different lobes of human brain. In today's lesson we are going to talk about typically a human brain, not the other organisms. Now there are different lobes present in human brain. Now this human brain is a large structure organ, and it has different lobes along with their functions. Now let us see the lobes one by one. First of all, we have frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is found at the front part of our brain, and the function of this frontal lobe is to help in thinking, memory, behavior, and movement of the body. Another one is the parietal lobe. At the side we have a parietal lobe. This parietal lobe is associated with language and touch. Now next one is temporal lobe. At the side, just at the side of our ears, we have temporal lobe. This temporal lobe helps in hearing, learning, and feeling. Next is occipital lobe. Just below the parietal lobe, we have occipital lobe. And this occipital lobe helps in sight, which means in seeing. And another one is the cerebellum. Cerebellum is found below the cerebrum, which I'll talk in a later part. The cerebellum helps greatly in controlling the balance of our body and in coordination. Now next lobe is the brainstem. This brainstem is also one of the important lobes of our brain, and it helps in breathing, heart rate, and regulating the temperature of our body. Now these are the different lobes of our brain. Now we'll go into the cross-section of our brain. Now when we talk about cross-section, which means we will see and everything about the internal structure of our brain. Now there are many internal structures found in our brain, and we will look into detail of each structure with the functions. Now to go into the detail of the internal structure of the brain, we will see firstly the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the uppermost part of the brain, and it is largest in structure. Now what is the function of cerebrum? Cerebrum helps in thinking, in reasoning, in learning, memory, and intelligence. You might have also learned somewhere that more the lobes found in your cerebrum, the intelligent you are. And next is cerebellum. Cerebellum, as I told you, it's found below the cerebrum. Now the function of cerebellum is to control movement, balance, and coordination. Another one is we have pituitary gland. Now your brain has two glands. One is pituitary gland, another one is pineal gland that I'll talk to you about a little later. This pituitary gland is one of the most important glands in your body. Along with nervous system, our body is also controlled by the hormonal system. And from where do these hormones come? These hormones come from different glands. And this pituitary gland is also one of the most important glands in our body. Now this pituitary gland in total secretes 10 hormones. And most of the hormones are steroid in nature, and these hormones target gonads. Now next part of the brain is pons virali. This pons virali's function is it helps. It's a respiratory center which controls respiration in human beings. Another part is medulla oblongata. This medulla oblongata is a part that actually connects your brain and the spinal cord. And the function of this medulla oblongata is that it regulates body temperature, it controls heartbeat, digestion, sexual behaviors, and emotional responses. Next is hypothalamus. This hypothalamus, it controls the body temperature, emotion, hunger, digestion, and sleep. You have thalamus. Thalamus is found in the middle part of your brain, and it relays motor and sensory signals to the other part of the brain and also helps in regulation of sleep, alertness, and wakefulness. Another one is corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is a white band which is filled with your nerve fibers, and its main function is to make a link between right and the left hemisphere of your brain. Well, to go into the other part, it has pineal gland. And as I had already mentioned that our brain has two glands. One is known as pituitary gland, another one is pineal gland. Pineal gland, it secretes one hormone, and the function of pineal gland is that it acts as biological clock. You might have wondered that before in olden ages there were no alarm clocks, yet people used to regulate their sleep, and this was mainly because of the pineal gland, which regulates the darkness and the brightness, and accordingly it regulates sleep in human being. Now midbrain, this midbrain, it's a small portion of a brain that helps in the movement of your eyes and also in auditory, that means in hearing, and your visual ability, that means your ability to see. Now lateral ventricle, there is a small green part. This lateral ventricle, it contains the fluid known as cerebrospinal fluid. This is watery jelly-like fluid, and this fluid is very important. It acts as cushion for the brain and prevents from damage. Not only that, this fluid also circulates nutrients to the parts of the brains and also removes waste from the brain.
The meninges is a layered unit of membranous connective tissue that covers the brain and spinal cord so that they are not in the direct contact with the bones of the spinal column or skull. The meninges are composed of three membranes. They are pia mater, the innermost, arachnoid, the middle layer, and the dura mater, the outer membrane.
And we have mammillary body. The mammillary body is actually associated with recollection of the memory, which means it recollects the memory and stores the memory for future use. And now the last parts of the brain, we have three. They are known as prefrontal cortex. This prefrontal cortex is present here at the frontal lobe, and the function of this prefrontal cortex is that it actually is associated with variety of behaviors, including planning. Then we have it also contributes to a personality development of an individual. Now next is we have amygdala. Amygdala controls the unconscious emotion, such as regulating your sadness and happiness. And finally we have hippocampus. This hippocampus merely forms and stores memories. Now these are the different parts of our brain. Now here we have learned different parts of our brain, and they are associated with different functions. All those functions are related to intelligence, coordination of the body, maintenance of the temperature of our body, so and so. Now, next part of central nervous system, as I mentioned, is spinal cord. Now, location of spinal cord. The spinal cord is found below the brain, and it extends till the vertebral column, till your backbone ends. It is cylindrical cord-like structure, and it consists of lots of neurons, nerve fibers. Now to go into a little bit detail of the ultrastructure of your spinal cord is also like your brain is made up of white matter and gray matter. But unlike brain, spinal cord has outer part formed of white matter and the inner part formed of gray matter. Not only that, our spinal cord also consists of different types of neurons, sensory neurons, interneurons, and motor neurons. Now, the major function of the spinal cord is that it is associated with reflex function. It is associated with reflex function. Now we will see little bit of summary of the central nervous system, as there is a diagram and there is a classification of nervous system. Nervous system is divided into two: central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. And the central nervous system is of two types: brain and spinal cord. Whereas as I have already told you that the central peripheral nervous system arises from the central nervous system. Now this peripheral nervous system can be of two types: autonomic and somatic. Somatic is to deal with the sensory and motor neuron, which will be on the peripheral cellular part of your body, whereas autonomic nervous system, they are usually associated with the glands. Now this autonomic nervous system is of two types. They are sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. Now we'll go into detail of what is sympathetic nervous system and what is parasympathetic nervous system. Well, before I tell you about what is sympathetic nervous system, please recollect some memories, like your teacher enters the class and says, "Today we are going to do surprise test." How do you feel? You start shivering. Your stomach starts growling. You start sweating. Give another example. You're walking alone in the forest and you encounter a tiger. What will you do? Or you're in a washroom and you encounter a snake. What will you do? You have to make immediate decision, either to kill that animal, fight with that animal, or run away. Now, such actions in our body is controlled, or different actions like running away, like fighting, they are controlled by sympathetic nervous system. So overall, this type of nervous system, it controls our body in stressful condition. Like encountering a tiger is stress. Your teacher talking about your surprise test is a stress. Encountering a snake is a stress. And how do you overcome this stress? You have to decide. Now this is helped by sympathetic nervous system, and this system is also known as fight or flight response, because you do either the two. Either you run away or you fight with the stress. Next is parasympathetic nervous system. This is totally complementary, opposite to that of your sympathetic nervous system, which means here your action is slow. The body performs the action under rest, like your digestion, like salivation, formation of urine. These are all associated with parasympathetic nervous system. Now let us come to this reflex. What is reflex? What do you do when you touch a hot flame? Do you keep on touching, or do you withdraw your hand? What do you do when you encounter a hot pan or you touch a hot pan? You remove your hands quickly, right? Yes, this is a reflex action now. Now let us go into definition of what is reflex action. Reflex action is automatic. You don't even realize that you are actually responding to some kind of stimulus. Stimulus is any external changes, like I talked about candle, the heat coming from candle, the heat coming from a hot pan. These are stimuli. Now, what is a reflex? Reflex is a response. The response is automatic, it's very quick, and it's involuntary. You don't realize that you are giving that response very fast. And that type of response shown by your body to some kind of stimulus is known as reflex action. Now there is a mechanism for reflex action. Before we learn about mechanisms, let us see some of the parts of the nervous system and your body associated with reflex. First of all, we have receptor organs. Any part of your body that receives a stimulus is known as receptor organ. Like for example, your eyes to receive light, your skin to receive touch, your ears to listen. These are receptor organs. Now next is you have sensory neuron. This is a part of nervous system. It's a neuron that takes the message from the receptor organ to the spinal cord. And next we have is the spinal cord. Now spinal cord is actually a center. It receives the message from the sensory neuron, and from there the message is again taken back by the motor neuron. And motor neuron ends to the effector organ. Effector organs are usually glands and your muscles. Now, if you're touching a hot pan, as soon as you touch it, you remove your hand. And what regulates that? The motor neuron present at your muscle, the tricep and the bicep. It regulates the removal of the hand. Now let us see quickly the reflex arc. Reflex arc, what is it? Now I have given you the different mechanisms or the parts involved. Now we'll see the reflex arc. In reflex arc, it's a short distance traveled by your impulse in a reflex action. That means, please look into the diagram. So here we have hot pan. Hot pan is a stimulus. Your hand is touching the stimulus, that is the receptor organ. From the hand or the finger or the skin, the message is carried to the spinal cord. The neuron that carries the message is the sensory neuron. And here in your spinal cord studies the message, and then now it realizes that it is hot and your hand should be removed immediately. And from there, you have the interneuron in spinal cord. Now after this, the message is transferred to motor neuron. Motor neuron carries the message to the muscle. Then you remove your hand, and see, this action is very fast. You'll not even realize that. So it is involuntary and fast action. So this is how your reflex system works in our body. And this reflex system is always in day to day. The way we respond. You're playing, you're watching a football match, and suddenly a football comes to your face. And what do? You respond immediately without even knowing. That is a reflex. Now next, let us go to types of reflexes. In types of reflexes, we have unconditional and conditional reflex. Unconditional reflex. Reflex, what is it? It's a response made by our body. And we have two types. One is unconditional. That means we are born with certain kind of reflex system. Like for example, a baby crying for milk, growling, sneezing, coughing. And next is conditional reflex. This conditional reflex comes merely through practice now. This is quite different from that of unconditional. Conditioned itself means you are conditioned to, made habituated to. Now you have to have a practice, then only you will be conditioned to this type of reflex. For example, playing a piano, playing guitar or any other musical instrument, or tying your shoelaces without even realizing that you are tying, or unlocking the lock at dark. These are some of the examples of conditional reflex. Now here, this conditional reflex can be very much related to learning in human being, in children, in adult. At school, when the teachers teach the students, then this can also be one of the conditional reflex, like answering, being able to answer to the questions, being able to do the work in time, being able to come to the school on time. These are all the conditional reflexes. Now here, these conditional reflexes are explained in two theories. One is known as classical conditioning, another one is known as operant conditioning. This classical conditioning was discovered by Ivan Pavlov, a Russian scientist. And this classical conditioning is associated with, especially it shows the relation between known stimulus and unknown stimulus. For example, in dog, firstly, this Ivan John Pavlov, what he did was that there was a dog, there was a food. He gave the food to the dog and it salivated. And there was a bell. That bell acted as unconditional stimulus, which means the dog doesn't know that the bell is food. But later on, when the food was shown, at the same time the bell was rung, then the dog got conditioned to that bell. And later on, without even food, only the bell was rung, dog could salivate for food. This is some kind of classical conditioning. Next is operant conditioning. This is very much a good example to our situation, our children. This conditioning is a type of conditioning with reward and discrimination or punishment. That means If we ask our children to write the homework and provide them with some reward, they are likely to learn more. So this is some kind of operant conditioning, which means individual learns better with reward, or individual does not do that particular thing if he or she is punished. So example was done here by B.F. Skinner, is also known as father of operant conditioning. B.F. Skinner, he raised a rat, and there were so many buttons in the cage. And when the rat pressed red button, he got food. And if he pressed other buttons, he did not get food. So the rat, in pursuit of getting food, he all the time pressed the red button. So this is how the reward conditioned the rat. Now these are mere differences. Now through this, I have come to the end of the lesson. Before we go, here are some of the takeaway from today's lesson. So some of the questions here are, what do you think would happen to you or a person if motor neuron from a gray matter is removed? Next, a person suddenly withdraws his hand after touching cactus. I think you all know what cactus is. Design a pathway for the completion of the nerve impulse in according to the above experience. What experience? Experience of touching a cactus. Now next is, with constant practice, you play any musical instrument well. But if you do not keep constant practice, you are likely to forget. Do you? Yes, you will forget. How do you relate these to conditional reflex? Well, thank you for listening to me. I'll see you again. Bye bye.